What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Friday, December 1st, 2017. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. And I'm just trying to set volumes here while we're going. There we are. There, much better, much better. All right. So, obviously, the lovely lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 today. And getting on into the news here, obviously the big news, you've probably seen it all over the corporate media, is that Michael Flynn is about to plead guilty to lying to the FBI. And there's apparently a plea bargain deal in the works, which a lot of people are very concerned is that Robert Mueller is going to arm twist Flynn into saying something that can be used to go after Donald Trump. And basically, this lying to the FBI about this conversation with the Russian ambassador, at one point, they're charging him with willful lying, but it came across like maybe it just slipped his mind. But the reality is that nothing Flynn did was illegal, and as a member of the incoming administration, it was his business to start cultivating contacts with the Russian government. So Mueller and the media are trying to spin this around that Trump is Putin's puppet, and we've got to get rid of him because Russia's the enemy, which technically, no, we're not at war with Russia just yet. And I mean, I'll be honest, Russia's not my enemy. I'm a big boy. I'll decide who my friends and enemies are, and Russia's not on that list. I mean, I didn't send Putin a Christmas card this year, but, you know where we're going on that. So basically, Flynn is in trouble not so much for the lying to the FBI, because that's a small charge, especially given that what he lied about was not a crime, and none of it implicates Trump himself. But apparently Flynn did have some dealings with Turkey, which carry a much stiffer penalty, and that appears to be the lever that Mueller is using to try and get Flynn to say something, anything that they can use to go after Donald Trump. And if anybody from the Trump White House is listening to the show, it's true I don't agree with Trump's war policy or what he's doing for the economy, and I'm very frustrated that he has not thrown Hillary Clinton in prison. But if Trump does not put on those presidential brass knuckles right now and start defending himself, he's going to be in serious, serious trouble. He's got to fight back. He's got to take the initiative, and he doesn't have it right now. Now, getting on down to Judge Roy Moore in Alabama, apparently Breitbart was interviewing yet another individual claiming that Roy Moore is racist, and apparently this lady is a former police officer, was saying that she was told to watch him at ball games, make sure that he didn't hang around with the cheerleaders. And when pressed on the issue, it all came on out. She had absolutely no evidence to back up the claim that Moore is racist or that he wants to bring back segregation. She said, "It's just my feeling. I feel this is what he is." Well, that's pretty thin to the point of transparency. Meanwhile, Conyers just had a little press conference and said that he is not stepping down, even though a lot of people, including Nancy Pelosi, are saying that maybe he ought to, because apparently the allegations against him are a lot more credible than the ones against Moore. And a lot of John Conyers' former aides are trying to come to his defense. One of them came on out and said, "Yeah, he walked around in his underwear all the time. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. You guys are making such a fuss about that, but we got to get Moore and we got to get Trump here." Now, apparently, an influential Democratic donor, Jeremy Goldberg, 20 years old, was caught trying to lure a 12-year-old girl into his SUV in New York. and the young girl basically was just waiting for a bus, and he said, I'll give you a ride. And she basically ran away from him, reported to the police officers, the police what was going on. When the officers showed up, Goldberg basically sped away and crashed into a bus. So it does seem like there's a lot of sickos out there. All righty, let's get some phone calls here. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Mike. Yeah, there are a lot of sickos out there, but one sicko that I don't understand why the deep state is attacking him is George H.W. Bush, who's part of the deep state. You think they're trying to ruin his credibility because maybe he's going to make a deathbed confession that he maybe was the architect of the JFK assassination? I mean, what do you think?
I think we're seeing a system that's starting to eat its own. And I've noticed they've gone after George W. Bush as well. And it may be that, yeah, they're concerned that he's going to break ranks. Remember when E. Howard Hunt passed away, he made a deathbed confession about the John F. Kennedy assassination. So, yeah, they may be concerned about that.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And we're going to take a phone call from Lou in California. Lou, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Wie geht's es Ihnen, Mike?
It's good. Danke.
Yeah, frohe Weihnachten.
Little early, you know, but we'll get there.
Yes. Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm glad it's Friday. It was a rough week. I need the weekend off.
Yeah, I know, with the sound system and all that, huh?
Oh, yeah, when Claire takes the microphone in hour number 3, I'm just going to fall asleep.
There you go. Got a couple of questions and concerns there, Mike. First of all, that Argentinian submarine that's been in the news this month, but I think it's been now a week or so that it's been out of the news. You got anything on that story there, Mike?
Well, they're assuming the submarine is lost, and apparently there was a sonic event detected in the area, and finally the Argentine government came on out and said there had been one final radio communication. Apparently they were running with the snorkel up to charge the submarine's batteries, and for some reason the little flap valve on the snorkel failed, and all of a sudden seawater started pouring into the submarine, which sparked a fire. And at this point, with enough volume of water, it probably sank below its crush depth.
Oh, okay. So
well, that would be more merciful than if they just bottomed out. I mean, if you think about it, of the ways that people in a submarine can die, if they just rest on the bottom, then they asphyxiate over a period of days, whereas an implosion, they're dead instantaneously. They may not even feel hardly anything.
Yeah, because they reported that explosion, that it was around that submarine.
Yes.
But then the news, the corporate media just stopped reporting basically when after that all happened.
Well, the sub is gone and the crew is lost, and there just isn't really any more to report. I don't even know if they're going to try and find the wreckage. They certainly can't salvage it. I mean, look how long it took for the U.S. to finally go down and take a look at Scorpion and Thresher.
Oh, yeah. So basically, I guess they're presumed dead then at this point.
Yes.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Mike, my other concern, my other question is, I don't know if, we may have mentioned it before with you, but I don't know if you're really familiar. On model trains, I have a locomotive that isn't running, and I was thinking of taking it apart, but I didn't really know what to look for in the motor and stuff. I wonder, have you been through that before?
Well, I had model trains when I was a kid. It's been a long while, but basically you're looking for an electrical fault. Best case is the wiring from the wheels that gets the power from the track has come loose. Worst case, the motor has burned out. Frankly, if the train is that important to you, I would seek out somebody who knows how to repair and replace parts professionally.
Right. Okay. Yeah, 'cause that's what I'm thinking. Because, like I said, I was about to open the case on the cover on my locomotive and stuff, but then I was thinking, well, what am I going to be looking for here?
Well, how old is it?
Oh, it'll be I've had about at least 2 years now.
Well, the newer trains are not really built for their owners to take them apart and repair them. When I was a kid, yeah, you could. The screws were out there and screwdriver and you were in there. I would refer to a professional.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, because I just want to be able to enjoy it for Christmas.
Buy a new one. The malls are open. Get out that credit card and buy a new train. When I was doing it, they had HO scale. I like those little N scale trains, the little microscopic ones. I'd love to have a coffee table with a glass top and just a little N scale train running around inside it. That would be cool. Yeah.
I'm going to try to fix this one first. It's at HHO scale and stuff. It's a Santa Fe silver and red war bonnet color scheme, It's a small diesel, and I really enjoy it and stuff like that. I'm going to try to get it fixed and stuff, I really enjoy that thing.
Well, all kids, I think, have a resonance with trains. They're big, they're powerful, and because they're not up in the sky, you see them rolling by close-up. And when Claire and I were living in Washington State, we got involved with a railway museum, and I put together a documentary for them, and we got to ride the trains. I even got to drive the locomotive, even though I technically, didn't have the proper certifications. But it's fun. People just sort of respond to that.
Yeah, and do you feel relaxed when you run it or see it run and stuff?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
That's it for now. You take care now, Mike. I'll call you later for other things.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and good luck with your trains.
Yeah.
Not sure why he thinks I would be an expert on that. Let's switch over to Mike in The Last Frontier. Insert ominous music here. Mike, you there?
Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine. What's on your mind today?
I just wanted to say that Peter really knocked it out of the park yesterday with his call, and it's becoming more of a political issue now with accusations. It's a difficult topic because there is a lot of bad stuff going on out there, but there's a lot of stuff that just isn't true. So I appreciated that insight he had. And I wanted to comment real quickly on this natural gas you mentioned about China.
Yes, they signed a deal with Alaska. Now, they haven't committed to building that pipeline across the gap there, but it's a distinct possibility, and it's going to be a heck of an engineering project.
Problem with the natural gas is that it's not like oil as far as shipping goes. It's not cost effective to ship it.
Even liquefied.
So people want that heavy oil.
Hello?
People want that heavy oil, Mike, but the natural gas, there's quite a bit also in Australia and Indonesia. So I'm not sure that the Chinese would take it. Did you get any details from the article you read about who will they be buying it or just building the infrastructure?
The article seemed to indicate China wanted to buy it. Right now, because the heavy oil is becoming scarcer and harder to get to the surface, they're starting to look at natural gas, which exists in huge amounts. I mean, look at all these refineries where they're just flaring off the natural gas because there's nothing else they can do with it. And so the current thinking within the industry is let's stop just burning that off and find ways that we can deliver it to customers.
That's exactly right. They've been flaring it up on the North Slope for 30 or 40 years because it comes up with the oil.
Yes.
And energy costs got pretty high a couple of years ago, and there was this huge push to build it's kind of like the F-35. They're trying to do so many things such as lower local energy costs and then export it, and they wanted to put it onto the railroad system and then they actually have a trucking system set up. So it's interesting, but it's a boondoggle. That's all I want to throw in there is that the Japanese were interested for a while, and they offered to build the liquefaction plant and got turned down. Now we're over talking with China. I got a bad feeling, Mike.
Well, I'm glad that there's still a semblance of peaceful coexistence and commerce with China, because ultimately, looking at the U.S. war agenda, that yuan is still a target.
When I was in Taiwan, I asked because they use a lot of natural gas.
Yes.
I just started asking people, where does it come from? And they have a little bit, but they're producing quite a bit with a $1 trillion economy on a small island, and they need a lot of energy resources. But it's coming from Indonesia, Australia, so it's too bad it's being flared off, but it's not like the oil. There still is so much oil up there, but we can't get those big companies to produce it. They've got a lot locked in reserve that they don't want to develop for geopolitical reasons. So that's all I had today. It's a really difficult topic, but I'm one of those people too that would like to just trade with everybody and get along. So, but we got to be smart about it.
Yeah, I agree. We have to be smart about it. And yeah, there are oil reserves that are not yet being developed. The oil companies like to produce just enough to meet customer demand. They don't want an oversupply because that will drive prices down. So yeah, they're going to leave some of that oil in the ground for some point in the future when they're going to need it. But as the heavy oil supplies start to shrink, I mean, we're already hearing that Saudi Arabia is already looking forward to a day where they're not going to have oil coming out of that ground. And at that point, the surplus of methane coming out of the earth, that becomes a viable alternative. Okay?
Mike, I appreciate your input, and I'm glad you got your tech stuff sorted. I'm going to keep listening. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm glad we got the tech stuff sorted as well. And right now we're working on a new system to replace Bamuser, and that's probably going to be actually better than what we had before. Now, getting on back to the news. The New York Times reported yesterday morning that sometime in the near future, probably January, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will be ousted in favor of sitting CIA Director Mike Pompeo. And Pompeo's job will be taken over by Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, who is hawkish. And at this point, we're getting confirmations from everywhere that it's going to happen. The problem is with Pompeo as Secretary of State, it moves us closer to wars with Iran and North Korea. And again, this stuff could spin totally out of control. I mean, look how the smear job on Roy Moore spun out of control and backflashed on the Democrats. So once the war is going, nobody really knows how it's going to end. And common sense tells you, when two nations go to war, both nations are convinced they're going to win. And obviously, half the time, they're going to be wrong. Now, speaking about Tom Cotton, he received nearly $1 million to oppose the Iran deal. So he had his hand out. Somebody greased his palm, this group. He got $960,000 into his campaign. And after that, he led the writing of this letter signed by 47 Republicans stating that a GOP White House would not adhere to any accords with Iran. Now, technically, he's crossing a line because foreign policy is exclusively the domain of the White House and the State Department. Members of Congress are supposed to be concerned with this country. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And time to get out your paper and pencil, because if you want to help Republic Broadcasting, and folks, we need it. We wouldn't ask if we didn't need it. Nobody's getting rich in this business. We're not driving supercars and going out and having wild parties. We're just hanging on. We're just getting by. We're dedicated to doing this job of keeping Americans fully informed. So if you want to help Republic Broadcasting, the postal address to send a check, money order, box tops, whatever, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to phone in a donation with a debit card or credit card, the number is 800-724-2719. That's 800-724-2719, extension 03. Now, getting on back to the news here, we're talking about Senator Tom Cotton, who is a Republican, and I don't understand why Trump is moving him to take over Mike Pompeo's job at the CIA, because it's reducing the Republican Senate lead, the advantage over the Democrats. So that's the reason for the big fight over Judge Roy Moore. The Democrats are trying to gain a majority in the Senate and the House next year. Now, I don't know what the rules are in Tom Cotton's home state. I know in many of the states, the governor is required to appoint a replacement from the same party, but it doesn't apply to all states. So we'll keep an eye on what's going on there. Now, we did this little flashback story about this letter with the 47 senators saying, we don't agree with the Iran deal. We think it's a bad idea. Now, everybody else who signed that P5+1 deal, they thought it was great. They thought it was a wonderful thing. It's only the war hawks in this country and Israel that want the deal to be destroyed and open the door to a war with Iran. Now, the House Special Investigation Committee is issuing subpoenas now, and they were served to the acting director of the State Department of Health, Preston Dorfinger, Office of Management and Enterprise Services Acting Director Denise Northrup, and Governor Follin's Chief of Staff Chris Benge. And apparently the committee is looking into the financial mismanagement of the health department, which led to a $30 million debt. And apparently there have already been resignations in the light of this scandal as well. Is this the best we can do for politicians? Is this the best we can do for people to run this country? Now, up in Massachusetts, Senate leaders are saying they'll hire an independent special investigator to look into allegations of sexual misconduct by Brian Hefner, the husband of Senate President Stanley C. Rosenberg. And Senate Majority Leader Harriet Chandler said the decision is unprecedented, but it's the right thing to do. Find out if it really happened before you destroy someone's life. And we have already seen too many instances where people are being fired over an allegation. Nobody waits for the proof. And as we have seen with Judge Roy Moore, and also last year with Donald Trump, a lot of these women making these allegations are just, they're making it up. This police woman, who's the latest one to come out against Roy Moore, apparently Judge Moore sent her brother to prison. So there's obviously a motive for her to try and hurt him. Payback, revenge. Got to look at these things very, very closely. Sean Hannity did a show, and he's doing wonderful work out there, where he has drawn out the links showing Jeff Sessions' ties with the Clintons' corrupt cabal. And he had a little chart there showing all the financial links about how Jeff Sessions is profiting from what the Clintons have been doing. And that is another reason why he's out to protect her. And if you look at the sheer scale of how much of that government inside the Beltway are trying to protect Hillary Clinton, that right there is a good indicator of just how corrupt the government has become. Because they're not protecting her because they like Hillary Clinton. Hardly anybody does. but they're protecting their own involvement in some of these scandals. They're protecting the narcocracy. They're protecting the government-sanctioned gun and drug running. If that all came out to full view of the American people, this government would be over and done with. Americans are not going to sit still for a government that says, you know, we have a war on drugs and drugs are bad, and then turns out to be the largest smuggler, dealer of illicit substances in the entire country. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Hillary Clinton is now facing money laundering allegations. And this is on top of the earlier allegation about how they laundered the money that went to pay for that dodgy dossier through Fusion GPS, so it wouldn't show up on campaign records as being what it was for. But apparently there's been a discovery that the Clinton Foundation has underreported the donations from Rosatom as part of the Uranium One deal. Now, supposedly there was $145 million donated to the Clinton Foundation connected to the Uranium One deal, and now they're saying there actually seems to have been a lot more, and nobody knows exactly where it went. It's time for that foundation to be fully audited. And it's rather amazing, actually I think the word would be disgusting, to see the machinery of government dedicated to going after Donald Trump and just working as hard as they can to not have to look into Uranium Gate, Primary Gate, Dossier Gate, and all those other scandals. We are way beyond Richard Nixon and Watergate at this point. Now, Judicial Watch has released some of the documents that they obtained from the FBI regarding that meeting between Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch at the airport. And originally the FBI claimed they didn't have anything. Judicial Watch went to court, and finally the FBI said, okay, we got some documents, and here you can have them. And what's really interesting is the documents are less about the actual meeting and focus mostly on controlling leaks. And they were very concerned about the leak that Bill Clinton delayed his aircraft taking off in order to maneuver this meeting with the Attorney General. And so that was the FBI's focus. They don't care if Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch are working out a deal to save Hillary Clinton, but by golly, they got to hunt down these the leaker who's making it look bad to the American people. My goodness, we can't have that happen. So the FBI was unconcerned about what crimes Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch may be discussing. They were after that whistleblower. We got to get that whistleblower. And remember, it was only a few days after that tarmac meeting that James Comey had that very strange press conference where he went down the laundry list of Title 18 felony violations committed by Hillary Clinton, and then ending with his recommendation she not be charged, which is not the FBI's job. And, of course, Loretta Lynch said, well, we're going to take the FBI's recommendation, and that was basically it. A get-out-of-jail-free card. Now, politics is perception, and the perception is that Loretta Lynch and James Comey and certainly the Clintons are crookeder than a dog's hind leg. They're so crooked, they have to screw their socks on in the morning. Now, over at the New York Times, they have crossed the line from journalism, not that they've been unbiased and objective, and now they're actually openly using their newspaper and website for lobbying for the Democrats. And apparently on the editorial pages, rather than simply sharing the opinion that they didn't agree with the Republicans' tax reform legislation, the New York Times editorial page was actively encouraging their readers to call their members of Congress, call them United States senators, and say, stop this bill. And that is way out of line. That's not what a news media organization is supposed to do. Now then, getting on over to the war zones, emphasis on the plural. And it's getting really tense over there. Apparently, the Syrian army and a Syrian state television team, earlier today, entered the eastern Lebanese town of Tafal, one day after around 110 Lebanese and Syrian families returned to the town. So this is another one of these areas that's been cleared out of ISIS, Al-Qaeda. So that was a good thing here. Now, the U.S.-led coalition is acknowledging killing more than 800 civilians in Iraq and Syria airstrikes. I would bet you a nickel the number is actually much higher, but they're admitting to 801 who've been unintentionally killed by coalition strikes. That's a lot of people. They're not picking their targets. Now, the U.S. government has a polite term for all this. It's called collateral damage. Like, you shouldn't care. It was just collateral damage. It really isn't important. It wasn't militarily significant, therefore don't care about it. That's a tough sell for the families and friends of those 801 people. I mean, if the U.S. government accidentally dropped a bomb on your house and killed most of your family, would you be happy with collateral damage? That's all it is. Why are you so upset? Now, as you know, everybody is in a lather over North Korea's recent ballistic missile test, which showed that North Korea has developed a new longer-range rocket, longer range than even the Taepodong 2. And looking at the photo I saw of it, it looks like they did figure out that making the rockets too thin did make them fragile. So this one's a lot bulkier. And they launched it at 2,800 miles straight into space and came right on back down. And working out the energy it takes to reach that high in space, it's easy to calculate just how far it could fly around the globe on a flat trajectory. And yes, it could hit much of the U.S. mainland, which I'm hoping makes Hawaii a less of a target if things do go south with North Korea. But satellite photos appear to be showing that North Korea may be preparing another missile launch. This is the headline that we're seeing in Zero Hedge. But what they've actually found on the satellite images, the North Korean military is constructing another launch pad. Well, that may indicate a much more rapid test cycle, but you don't build a new launch pad for each new missile test. So I'm not sure that another missile launch is imminent. It's certainly going to happen at some point. North Korea is going to be testing their weapons to improve them, make sure that they work, just as the United States does. Or the next island over there, the Pacific Missile Test Range. They're constantly shooting rockets off from there. Or for those of you in Southern California, Vandenberg. You've probably seen those clouds, those strange colored clouds left in the sky at sunset from a missile launch. Now, the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, is out there saying it's time to drop all this pretense about concern about North Korea's nuclear weapons, because it's sounding a lot like U.S. concerns about Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons and Assad's sarin gas. And Lavrov is saying that the U.S. should just come clean. If it's looking for a pretext to destroy North Korea, just be honest and say, we want to destroy North Korea. And stop trying to come up with some kind of an excuse or justification, because, frankly, at this stage of the game, nobody's going to believe it anyway. It's obvious the Russian government doesn't buy any of this. The American people aren't buying any of this. All of these war hawks may be going to bed at night just saying, they believe us, they do believe us, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. I'm sure all Americans believe us here. No, they don't here. Now, back in 2008, U.S. President George W. Bush declared the U.S. would stop using cluster bombs by 2019. Now, cluster bombs are very nasty weapons. They're aerial denial weapons, and what a cluster bomb is there's a large outer casing that looks like a regular bomb, and on the way down, the casing peels away, and inside are hundreds of these little tiny submunitions, about the size of a baseball, that will explode when they hit the ground. And they have been responsible for a lot of civilian deaths. And as a matter of fact, before her death, even Princess Diana was trying to build a global campaign to ban the use of these weapons. Now, part of the problem is that sometimes these bomblets, these cluster bomb munitions, are set for delay, or they're set to be landmines. Just stay there until something drives over them or somebody steps on them, and then they go off. That's what makes them such a problem for the countries on which they're used. Even the bomblets that are supposed to explode instantly on impact have a high failure rate. As much as 20% of the bomblets released in modern cluster bombs fail to detonate on first use. And as they sit there on the ground, again, somebody drives over them or steps on them, or just time and corrosion, they can go off at random. And that was why Bush said we were going to get rid of them by 2019. Unfortunately, yesterday, the Pentagon declared that they're going to change the policy, that cluster bombs have a legitimate use in military operations, and the U.S. will continue to use them. Now, getting on back to Syria, Israel has granted the first Golan Heights oil drilling license to a company linked to Dick Cheney. And this is Genie Energy, a local subsidiary of the company, which is advised by former Vice President Dick Cheney, and whose shareholders include Jacob Rothschild and Rupert Murdoch. And they now have exclusive rights to a 153-square-mile radius in the southern part of the Golan Heights. This, of course, is going to be controversial. Israel seized the Golan Heights in the Six-Day War in 1967 and annexed the territory in 1981. Its administration of the area is not recognized by international law. No other country on earth recognizes that annexation. Okay, our sirens are going off here. They're testing our new, the tsunami siren to be followed by our nuclear attack siren. So this is the first time we're going to be hearing that. Now, getting on over to Europe, Angela Merkel is feeling the pressure. She was unable to form a coalition government. The polls are definitely turning against her. And it now seems inevitable there are going to be new elections, and she'll probably do worse in the new elections than she did before. She's also coming under fire from her own government for spending too much time and energy trying to control the whole European Union from inside Germany. And this came from Alex Schaefer. He's a member of parliament for Germany's Social Democratic Party. And it's basically saying it's not your Europe. And remember what happened to the last German leader who decided they were going to be in charge of all of Europe. Okay. They're still sirening out there. Alrighty, now then, let's get on to the wonderful world of refugees and migrants. One of the big problems they're dealing with, first of all, it seems like everybody is cutting the illegal immigrants and the migrants a lot of slack. They seem to be getting away with a lot of things. I'm going to be talking about the Kate Steinle verdict next here. But up in Portland, there was this Muslim migrant was running a halal grocery store, and he's apparently was running a welfare scam. So Ali Ratib Daham pled guilty to federal food stamp and welfare fraud. He also admitted to money laundering and theft from the state's main care program. Daham's going to spend 33 months and will pay more than $1 million in restitution to the government. In exchange, prosecutors are agreeing to drop dozens of other charges in the case. The plea deal will be considered in federal district court Tuesday. Now, he's pleading not guilty, because if he pled guilty, that would immediately cause him to be deported. But none of this would have happened in the first place if we had a secure border and a reasonably intelligent immigration policy. Which gets us onto this case of Jose Ennis Garcia Zarate, who yesterday was found not guilty of first-degree murder, not guilty of second-degree murder, and not even guilty of manslaughter in the shooting death of Kate Steinle. And the jury found him guilty of being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm. But the reality of the story is Kate was killed while walking on San Francisco's Pier 14. This man fired the gun. Now, his defense was he fired the gun intending to just have the bullet go someplace else, and she was killed by the ricochet. Well, he was still out there pulling that trigger. And anybody who is a gun enthusiast understands when you pull that trigger, you are legally liable for where that bullet goes, even if it hits something you didn't intend to hit with it. That's why you have to be very careful about shared walls in multifamily units. But in this case, the jury didn't see it that way. He did kill her. It should have, at the very least, been manslaughter. This guy had an illegally owned weapon out in public and was holding it outwards in an irresponsible manner. That bullet traveled 78 feet, which means he was aiming it horizontally. Now, Donald Trump tweeted out, it's a disgraceful verdict, and a lot of people are wondering if there was political pressure applied to this case in order to not have an illegal immigrant convicted of murder at a time when more and more Americans are saying, seal that border. And you have the globalists on the other hand saying, no, keep the borders open. If a few people get killed, it's a small price to pay for the New World Order. Now, the defense attorney in this case responded to Donald Trump's tweet saying he's promoting hate and says the client's illegal status has no relevance. Yes, it does. This guy had been deported many times and kept sneaking back into the country. If he'd been kept out of the country, Kate would still be alive today. Yes, his illegal status is relevant. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here and getting into the wonderful world of political correctness. Apparently in France, they're considering a law that would make insults based on gender a crime. I'm not even really sure what they mean by that, but it's part of this apparent agenda to get us so concerned about what we're saying and doing that we become isolated and paralyzed. And by the way, George Orwell predicted this as well in 1984. Just get people so worried about offending everybody else or saying something that's bad or doing something that's bad that they've, in effect, become incapable of any action. So, up in Sweden, they've got a new government report written by the Swedish National Defense Research Institute, and it's called The White Hatred. And it characterizes Sweden's new media, in other words, any media that doesn't blindly regurgitate politically correct narratives, as threats to democracy, equating them with neo-Nazi groups. And apparently in this report, they make the claim that putting the word refugees in quotation marks is hate. I mean, that's how absurd this is getting. And apparently using the term unaccompanied children in quotation marks is also a form of hate, because it implies that these unaccompanied children might actually be adults. And as it turns out, most of them are. Now, as you know, it's Christmas time. And apparently this LGBT activist has put a nativity scene in front of their home with 2 St. Josephs and no Virgin Mary. And people are calling it the gaytivity scene. And apparently somebody responded with a lesbian nativity scene that had 2 statues of Mary and Jesus in a rainbow blanket. Isn't it funny how the same people who are telling us to be careful that we don't offend anybody else are perfectly happy to come on out and do things that are probably going to be very offensive to Christians? Seems like a double standard out there. As far as the one with the 2 St. Josephs and no Virgin Mary, I just had to post with it that YouTube clip from the movie Life of Brian, where this one guy is saying, I want to be a woman, I want to have babies. And the other guy says, you can't have babies. He says, oh, you're oppressing me, you're oppressing me. He says, no, where's the baby going to gestate? I mean, that was satire, and we're there now. We've actually become a Monty Python society. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, there was a news site called Medusa Magazine, and lately they've been getting a lot of attention because of its social justice articles that basically parroted the liberal talking points about gender and sexuality issues. And this website was cited by several major corporate media sources and sparked outrage and agreement by commenters. But apparently, earlier this week, this Medusa Magazine site was shut down, and the person behind it came on out and said, this was a satire site. This was all a hoax. It was a joke. But because they were saying the politically correct things, they were supportive of, they appear to be supportive of the agenda, the corporate media just went right along and said, oh yes, according to Medusa Magazine, you know, all men are bad, terrible, evil things. And Medusa Magazine was supposed to satirize the feminist far left, and apparently the feminist far left didn't realize they were being satirized. Now, as you know, we're coming up next month on the vote on net neutrality, and it's a contentious issue. Most ordinary Americans want the Internet to be declared a public utility and run like one. They want the common carrier concept to be enforced, as it is with telephones. Now, the FCC had this open comments period, which ended in August. And apparently, data scientist Jeff Cowell did a study that found at least 1.3 million anti-net neutrality comments registered with the FCC were faked. They came from a single central source. And when he took out all the fake comments that were botted into the FCC, basically found that 99% of the comments supported net neutrality. Now, the big ISPs, they want more money. And the way they're going to get more money, I mean, they're not putting it into their systems. Nobody's getting the bandwidth they actually pay for in this country, as it turns on out. But what they want is they want to have a fast lane for their fellow corporations for content delivery, which they will charge for. But because bandwidth is not infinite, to carve out the fast lane for the corporate content means taking bandwidth away from everybody else. And we're already dealing with very limited bandwidth, especially here in Hawaii. I pay Spectrum for 300 megabits coming into the home. I'm lucky if I get 60 download and 6 upload. That's the reality. And when net neutrality ends, it's going to get worse. Now, one of the downsides, if you will, of all of these cyber weapons being leaked out of NSA, they're getting into the hands of cyber criminals. And I'm looking at this article that came out of Bloomberg saying that these cyber criminals have incredibly sophisticated ways to breach banks' defenses. Well, yeah, they're using weapons developed to be weapons of war. And apparently, according to the SWIFT Global Payments Network, there's been a significant evolution in the threat level just in the last 18 months. And the cyber criminals are deploying increasingly sophisticated ways of breaching bank cyber defenses to launch finely orchestrated attacks. And intruders can spend more than a year preparing their attacks against a target. Now, yet another former NSA analyst faces criminal charges. This is the story of Karen Melton Stewart. She was a foreign language intelligence analyst with the Weapons and Space Directorate at the NSA, and she discovered that the Russians were selling GPS jammers to Iraq before the 2003 U.S. invasion. And the jammers would have caused missiles using GPS for navigation to go off target. And apparently she did 6 months of reports delineating the technical attributes of the GPS jammers. And apparently she was credited by her management team with saving thousands of American lives. So this was a good thing. It allowed the U.S. to basically circumvent the GPS jammers. But apparently Stewart got passed over for a promotion based on her work. And in trying to find out what was going on, the lady who got the job she wanted basically turned out to be a honey trap, which led to the exposure of an NSA inside the NSA running a blackmail cell. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Facebook is out with a new AI scanner, scanning people's messages on Facebook. And apparently, if you post a troubling comment as determined by this AI system, you will be reported to authorities as a possible potential suicide. If you post anything on Facebook that makes it sound like you might be thinking about suicide, you will be arrested. And, of course, they're going to get a lot of innocent people. All right, we're going to take some phone calls here. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. And kind of in the same vein here, we know that it's a crime for the FBI to lie to the FBI, but how about, has anybody ever been held accountable for the FBI or the intelligence community lying to us?
I don't know. It's a one-way street.
And, like
it's a one-way street. You know, you can't lie to the government, but government lies to you all the time. That's how they have an advantage over you.
Yeah, this thing with Google about doing something suicidal or reporting you as suicidal if you say something that they don't like, it's the same thing. It's just a continuation of the can't criticize Israel thing. It's the same basic argument. And by the way, you'll probably get the gun rights of those people taken away as well. So it will be completely subjective to criticize Israel. You're not allowed to do that. You'll probably end up losing gun rights over that. Down the road, with the AI for the Google and the whole suicidal thing, if you're suicidal, yeah, Facebook, they'll take away your gun rights. That's the way they'll attack the Second Amendment on that. And they'll do it basically against, you were saying, by the way, earlier how it seems to be open season on Christians. And the simple answer to that is because the media tells you who your enemy should be. You're not allowed to criticize Israel, but but you can criticize
white males.
Open season. And white males, that's right.
Yeah.
And it's being directed that way. It has been directed that way for a long time. You can't even, this country is, I'm telling you, this is a very toxic thing. I'm a little upset that Trump is caving in, apparently, and going to move. Have you covered moving to Jerusalem? He's apparently ready to. Yeah,
I did cover that. I covered that earlier in the week, and yeah, I'm very disappointed in Trump. I'm not surprised though, because he's very tight with Netanyahu. Apparently, Trump's father and Netanyahu were buddy, and I'm not surprised about that part of it at all. What I mostly wanted from Donald Trump was a change to the war policy, which he campaigned on. No more foreign interventions. What I wanted from Trump was Hillary Clinton in jail for all the crimes she's committed, all the lives she's ruined, including my own. What I wanted Trump to do was to take a serious look at how our economy is functioning and make some fundamental changes to turn the system around, and he hasn't done any of those.
Yeah, exactly the same with me, Mike. And adding in I was for controlling immigration as well. But yeah, I had a discussion with my wife this morning talking about, and she was very upset at this new tax plan that's about to be endorsed and signed into law. And she gets angry at me because my wife is a City of LA worker, and she's much more pro-government than am I. And I keep telling her, well, I have nothing against the city. They pick up our trash, and we have libraries, and they put out our fires, and we get something back for what we pay for with the city. But with the feds, she goes, well, what do you think about this tax plan? I say it's awful, and she says, what should we do about it? I said, I call these guys all the time. You can't do anything. And I said, I hate to say it, but the only thing I can see is the only way is we have to fight. It's at the point where we have to fight, and nothing's going to change, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I can't say that to anybody because it's alarming to people. But that's where we are, in my opinion. It's so far down the road, Mike, we're going to have to fight.
I don't know how alarming it's going to be because, unfortunately, I'm hearing a lot of that in the callers to the show and some emails that I get. But again, I really would like to avoid a civil war or a revolution in the streets of America, and I am still thinking that the most likely outcome for where we are right now is a Soviet Union-style collapse of our central government. I mean, they're already eating each other politically in the media. The economy can't hold together much longer. And so I really do think they're getting close to the end. The big problem here is how do we keep the U.S. government from incinerating much of the world in their own death throes? And that's a distinct possibility that we have to look at. I remember when the Soviet Union collapsed, the first thing the rest of the world said is, who's in control of the nuclear weapons?
Right. And it was a hell of a danger. But and while they're doing all that, while they're terrorizing the rest of the world, they're going to be terrorizing us too, as they already are, really. So.
Yeah, it is. We've become a very oppressive society, a surveillance state. The U.S. government has gone way beyond what the Nazis could do, and even the Soviet Union under Stalin. And it's a reminder that whatever the government can do, it's going to do, just out of this idea that they have to be protected from the American people, because the American people aren't believing the lies anymore.
And there's absolutely no way that I can see, Mike, that this will be reformed internally, ever. It will never reform itself, this system. And I also I can't see anybody on the horizon that's even a possible a viable opposition leader.
Well, that's what we thought Trump was going to be, but the system protects itself, and whatever it took to get Donald Trump to abandon his supporters and go with the current agenda, they'll just do it to anybody else. You're right. The system will never reform itself because everybody on the inside of the system is getting rich and powerful and having a lot of fun being on the inside of that system. So they'll never change it. It has to go away. I would prefer it went away with the Soviet Union-style collapse. I understand a lot of people are thinking that a revolution is justified. And again, I would like to avoid that. But on the other hand, if one starts, I'm certainly not going to throw my delicate little body in the front of it to protect the government. I'm going to stand off to one side with a camera and take some pictures.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, everyone wants to avoid it, but at some point, it's so oppressive already and getting more so every day. I don't see, it won't reform itself, and like I told my wife, and I don't say this to people, Mike, I mean, I don't really speak politics to a lot of people. I do here, but I'm sort of anonymous here, you know. But I don't want to alarm people. We went to a dinner party last night, and everybody was feeling the same thing.
Yes.
But I pull back and say, I don't go as far as I'm saying right now that I don't see any way out of it other than fighting, frankly. So it's just beyond utterance. So. Yeah,
I'm seeing that around here as well. I'm hearing similar things from across the country. And that, for me, would be a terrible thing, because I don't think the American people as a whole are really ready to have a revolution and have a good outcome. And that's another reason to try and hold it back. Anyway, Peter, we're going to let you go. We got a bunch of calls waiting on the phone lines here, and I'd like to get to them. So we're going to switch over to Mike in Brazil. Mike, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hello?
Hello, Mike in Brazil. You're on the air.
Okay. Well, first, I'd like to say that Peter from Los Angeles is dead on. He's absolutely correct. I agree with him 100%. A revolution is inevitable, Mike. It's what's going to happen is this. It's going to be a triggering event. Whether it's staged or not, that's not the point. There's going to be a triggering event. People are going to go crazy, and the shooting is going to start. And talking about shooting, here in Brazil, guns are illegal. You cannot buy guns. There are no gun stores anywhere except for police officers and military personnel and all that. I have a gun, okay? So I have a SIG, okay, P226, 9mm, okay? And I had a confrontation with 3 thugs outside my house. I was outside, and they tried to steal my cell phone. And I pulled out the gun, and I pointed it at them. And I said, you want to go, you want to get my cell phone? Come on, come and get it. They ran like rabbits. Yes. Like rabbits. I didn't have to fire one shot, Mike. I didn't have to fire one shot. Somebody called the cops because they saw me with a gun in their hand. And when the cops came, they said, where'd you get this? And I said, well, I bought it in Bolivia. And they said, you know, this is an illegal gun. I mean, especially the caliber, because here they have restricted calibers and civilian calibers. Civilian calibers is anything smaller than a 7.65 millimeter. And mine was a 9mm, which is a law enforcement round, okay? Mm-hmm. And the cops said, you know what, I'll let you go this time, but don't show it to anybody, all right? So they just left me alone, and it just ended right then and there. Now, I got to tell you, you got one of the best shows on the internet, okay? Saturday and Sundays, I don't like into withdrawal symptoms, like coming off a drug or something, because I don't get to hear you. So you got one of the best shows on the internet, and I know there are a lot of people agreeing with me on this one. And talking about gun control and guns and this kind of stuff, I even made enemies with my stepdaughter on this subject because she's a medical doctor, and she said anybody with a gun ought to be hanged. And I said, okay, go ahead, start hanging me, all right? So she doesn't believe, she's a Marxist, a cultural Marxist. She was indoctrinated in the medical school that guns are bad and only the police and military should have guns. And I told her, listen, the next time when you're going to get raped or attacked in the street, wave your stethoscope in front of the thug and see if it's going to have an impact, okay? And then who are you going to call? You're going to call the priest with the Bible and tell them, get out of my face? Or are you going to call the guys with guns, meaning the cops? So to put this talking point aside, you keep talking about that thing about when the astronauts come back from space, they should be all dressed in ape suits. And this reminds me of the Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, you know, the old version. And I tell you something, that movie, Mike, that movie was prophetic. I'm talking about the Planet of the Apes and beneath the Planet of the Apes. It was so prophetic. It is unbelievable. I mean, you can see the parallels, Mike. You can see the parallels. And, you know, it's like we're getting to that stage. You know, war is inevitable. Revolution is inevitable. People had enough of this. Enough political correctness, enough of this transgender stuff, which, by the way, my stepdaughter loves it. She put a rainbow flag on her profile picture on Facebook.
Mike,
and
I'm sorry. I got to let you go. We got to do a break for commercials. But I share your concerns, and good that you have a gun. We'll be right back after these words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And following up on the call from Mike in Brazil, there was once a country that had that same idea. Only the police and the military were allowed to have guns, and ordinary citizens were not. It was called Nazi Germany. Didn't really work out all that well, so let's not make that mistake again. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Tom in Connecticut, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, this is Tom in Florida, Mike.
Oh, Tom in Florida, okay.
Okay, Michael, yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, that last caller was a very good call. He was right. The Planet of the Apes was a great movie, and the other one, they're great movies, and he's 100% correct. Yeah, Michael, and the great saying he needs to remember is this: with the gun, you're a citizen. Without a gun, you're a subject. So just let him remember that. Yeah, Michael, and speaking about what's going on in this country, United States, look what's going on in California with all those, they ought to call it commie phony. There's a bunch of commies over there. How that Kate Steinle got off of that murder trial, this guy got off killing Kate Steinle in a murder trial is unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. Apparently his attorney is already out there saying that anybody who disagrees with the verdict is a racist. You're just angry that because you hate Hispanics. No, we hate people who kill other people, and especially when they basically walk away from it.
Mike, let me ask you a question. There's something that your audience needs to know. Let me ask you this. The Hispanics come to the country and they have all these TV stations and news networks and radio and all that. How come the Germans don't have that? How come the Italians don't have that all over the United States? How come the French don't have that? The Danish, the Swedes, the Norwegians? How come all these people that came to this country don't have their own radio stations 24 hours, pumping in their own language, doing their own TV stations 24 hours? Every you're talking about with Babel, the Tower of Babel here. And can you imagine, Michael, if all these other cultures that came to this country, made this great country on earth, imagine if you had 24 hours of Italian radio stations and TV stations, and you're going to have English. I mean, but these Hispanics come here, and they don't come here to compliment, they come here to demand and eat from you. And it's not like, here in South Florida, they want radio stations 24 hours, they want TV stations. They don't have that in any other language.
Well, a lot of that, let's be honest, is driven by the economics of the situation.
Milwaukee, and what do they get in Milwaukee, Michael? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, I was just going to say, for somebody to set up a radio or TV station, they have to know that there's going to be a large enough audience to generate the ad revenues to be in business. Now, here in Hawaii, we have radio stations that are in Japanese, Chinese, a bunch of other languages I don't even recognize because we are a pan-racial society. But, of course, everybody's also well integrated into the society we have out here. I think the reason Norwegians don't have their own TV stations or radio stations is there aren't enough of them in a given market to make it financially viable. And, of course, these days, people who want to hear information in their own language, they can go on the Internet now. But you're absolutely right. The big problem we have, both with the illegal immigrants and with the refugees, is they don't want to assimilate. They are coming on in and demanding that we adjust to their way of life. Well, if their way of life was so good, why are they here? Why didn't they stay where they are.
Well, that's my point, Michael. Why are they coming here? This is nothing but a ploy by the liberal leftists who wanted to flood this place with these future voters for Democrats. So it's all 1, 2, free, 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 one free for me. Everything is free, free, free. That's what these illegals are thinking. I mean, Michael, if you took all the jobs away from all these illegals, they wouldn't come here. You really wouldn't need the wall. But actually, nowadays, you do need the wall because this is all about marketing of, hey, we're going to take over this country. We're going to call it, what do they call it, Ashland or La Raza? I mean, they literally want to take over the Southwest. They think that they own the place. I mean, it's unbelievable. After you do all the work, they want to take over the place. Look at Mexico, Michael. Look what's going on over there. Did you see how many murders they had over the past year?
Oh, yeah.
Was it 32,000 in 1 year?
Out of control drug problem. Their government is neck deep in it. Our government's neck deep in the Mexican drug cartels, if you remember Fast and Furious. But you're absolutely right. The Aztlan movement, I think it's called, they want to basically undo the agreement that General Santa Anna signed with Sam Houston, which basically said, yes, you get all of this land that used to be Mexico, and it's now going to be the independent Republic of Texas. And then, of course, Texas was annexed by the United States government and the western lands eventually as well. So that's the historical precedent for that claim. But on the other hand, if everybody starts going around and saying, well, we're going to undo the role of history, nobody's going to know who owns what anymore. When Bill Clinton signed that public apology law acknowledging the illegal annexation of Hawaii, a lot of the traditional Hawaiian families came on out and said, well, this invalidates all the land titles that were taken away from the indigenous Hawaiians and given to the military and everything else. And there was a big stink in the courts. And finally, the legislature just declared by imperial edict that all the current land titles are the correct ones. So the people whose land had been stolen weren't able to do anything about that. But again, the basic problem
is...
Yeah,
Michael, you know, another thing is what's going on with this Russian thing. All you hear in the media is about Russia, Trump, Russia. And now you got this Flynn guy. I mean, this is unbelievable.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Let's go back to the phones here. And now we're going to do Tom in Connecticut. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, well, a couple sobering conversations the last few. But on a Korea thing, you find it curious that I want somebody to stand up and say, "What? Well, our missile defense systems could easily knock this stuff out. I don't know why everybody's getting so upset about this. We're fine. Unless it's all a scam."
Of course it's a scam. They want to take more money away from the people and put it into the military-industrial complex, who then will turn around and funnel much of that money back into congressional campaigns. But the American people of my generation and my parents' generation forked over $5 trillion, and that was back when a trillion really represented a lot of money, for America's nuclear deterrent, which we still have. We have all the bombers, we have the submarines, we have the missile silos all over the Midwest. And the idea here is that nobody will dare attack us because it would be national suicide. Well, either that deterrent works and we have nothing to fear from North Korea, or it doesn't work, in which case we're all owed a refund. And that's the reality. We don't need an Army or a Navy or Marines or any of that as long as we have that nuclear deterrent, if in fact defense is our concern. But what the Pentagon is really about is projecting power into other people's countries.
But it seems like you're mixing offensive with the, is this the missile shield supposed to be like something that's supposed to be helpful also?
Well, it's
like knocking things out of the air instead of being an attack mechanism.
Well, the missile defense shield definitely is defensive, but the problem is, like so many other boondoggles we've seen from the military, like the F-35, the missile defense shield doesn't really work as well as advertised. And we've already got James Inhofe is already out there saying we need a new missile defense program. And, it's not his money he's spending, it's yours. But again...
Yeah, like we had to update the nuclear arsenal with another, $1 trillion they're talking about?
Yeah, they're talking about updating all of that. And the problem is that with Russia's newest generation reentry vehicles that are maneuverable, it's going to go right past our current missile defense system. And, of course, the military is now saying, well, we need to put more research into zero-time-of-flight weaponry, particle beams and lasers, but they've never been able to get those to work over a long distance because of that pesky problem with the atmosphere.
Well, I mean, to the point of the previous conversations, if something starts blowing out in this country as far as civil dissent, I don't know where it will end. That's, I mean, aside from really jackboot friggin' martial law, and then little enclaves of patriots or whoever you would term them out in the Midlands somewhere. I don't know. All the major cities would be locked down.
Yeah.
There would be nothing to do there.
I don't think a revolution is a good idea, and I can't imagine anything that would change my mind.
I'm on board with that idea, sure. Okay, take care. Thank you.
All right, thank you. But I concede, one may be inevitable anyway, despite my best efforts. All right, Miles in Maine. Aloha, Miles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today? Miles, are you there? Okay, I guess we lost Miles, so let's switch over to Jack in Georgia. Aloha, Jack. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. This
Hi.
is Jack from Georgia.
Yes.
This is about an issue that you touched upon a few weeks ago. It's the bag searching in movie theaters. Do you recall that?
Yes.
You go to the movie theater, they search your bag. Here's a more plausible explanation. It's not about security. I think it's an excuse to see if we carry food and cameras in our bags. They want us to buy their own overpriced junk.
Yes.
I don't know any other civilized country in the world that does that. I mean, we spent trillions of dollars in security, and we've lost most of our freedoms. So, I mean, imagine, go to a movie theater, they just treat you like a criminal or something.
Well, that's one of the reasons Claire and I don't go to movie theaters anymore. But what is happening with the security industrial complex is the same thing that happened with the military industrial complex. It's become so large and has so much economic power, it can literally warp the society and the government to feed its own greed. Eisenhower warned us about the military industrial complex, and he was absolutely right. And now we have, along with the military-industrial complex, the security-industrial complex, the medical-industrial complex, and these large ad hoc organizations or enterprises are all about feeding their own greed and at the expense of the American people.
I mean, now it's easy for the people to boycott the movie theaters. I mean, 30 years ago, maybe it was difficult. There was nothing else to do. But now with so many other choices, we can very easily boycott them if they want to degrade us when we go to the movie theater. I mean, you go there to relax. You don't go there to be like when you go to an airport.
Yeah, I had the same reaction at Disneyland. The last time Claire and I were in Southern California, we hadn't been to Disneyland in 15 years, I think it was.
Yeah.
And we drove on over there, and we're in this line, and they're searching everybody's purses and backpacks and patting them down. And I turned to Claire and I said, I can't be happy and relaxed going through this. And we just turned around and we left. And we'll probably never go back again.
Unfortunately, there aren't that many of the people that do that. So, yeah.
If you go back and you look at photos of Nazi Germany, the police and the military, they would just stop people in the middle of the street and, you know, pull their pants out, look down and make sure that they weren't carrying something. We're there. We're at that same degree of oppression, repression, if you will. And again, I do wish people would wake up, but again, on the other hand, I am not in favor of a revolution, although I concede one may be coming.
Right. Yeah, if there was a revolution, it would be a disaster. It would be nothing progressive, so it's better not to have a revolution.
Like I said, the signs I'm seeing are that the U.S. federal government is heading for a Soviet Union-style collapse. And there are quite a few striking parallels. The most important, of course, being the complete loss of faith and trust in that central government by the general population. And the Soviet Union was brought down by excessive military spending, which our government is now engaged in, and they were brought down by the people creating a peer-to-peer news reporting service called the Samizdat, which was actually based on fax machines. They didn't even have personal computers there. And it still exposed the government's wrongdoing to the general population until finally the people just stopped listening to what the government had to say. And it couldn't function any longer, and it came apart. And I think we're coming up on that same moment here in the United States.
Yeah, there's an interesting blog that talks about that by an ex-Soviet expat, Dmitry Orlov. Dmitry Orlov, he talks about the collapse. He's written books about that. The thing is, in difference, in the old Soviet Union, people knew, the majority of people knew that the government was lying. But here with the media, these guys are very smooth. And I don't think the American people believe that the MSM are lying. I mean, you know that. I mean, you understand that when you talk to people around you. Just it's not. They don't know that the people are the New York Times, the NPR, the CNN. They're lying. It's a different response from what the Soviet...
I'm not so sure anymore. I mean, the polls are showing that public trust and confidence in the corporate media is at an all-time low. It's in the single digits. And so I think we're at that same point. The American people know the media is lying to them. That's been growing ever since the claim about Saddam's nuclear weapons. Now the American people are realizing the extent to which our elections are being rigged. So there's an awareness that is growing across the land. And again, it's going to lead to a point where the people are just going to say, this is not my government, it's not what's in the Constitution, and I'm just not going to do what they say anymore. Peaceful, nonviolent, non-cooperation. That worked for Gandhi in India, and it could work as well here.
Right. I don't know, there are other countries like Germany where the Gandhism, I don't think will have worked. So... Well,
Gandhi made an observation about tyrants, and he says there have always been tyrants, and for a while they can seem invincible, but they always fall. And he was right. Hitler fell, Stalin fell, Ceausescu fell, rather hard. And the Soviet Union collapsed, and I think that's what's going to happen here in the U.S.
All the countries you mentioned, except the Soviet Union, they collapsed from outside. Only the Soviet Union collapsed from within, but now it reemerged as Russia, and now they have the similar problems with. The West is.
Well, the West is trying to create this image that it's the rebirth of the Soviet Union, as part of the war propaganda. And by the way, Rome also collapsed from internal, over too much debt, too much corruption, and following the loss of the 3 legions in Germany, they couldn't police their empire any longer. Right. They began to fragment and break away.
Right, anyway, it was the pushback from the Germans in the north who gave the coup de grace to the Roman Empire.
By the time Rome was sacked, it was obvious the empire was already falling. I mean, it had already split to the Eastern and Western empires, and the Western Empire collapsed, and the Eastern Empire eventually became the Ottoman Empire. Anyway, Jack, we're going to let you go. We're running out of time. We're coming up to the top of the hour. And so we're going to switch over to Curtis in Nevada. Aloha, Curtis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I just wanted to try to finish off a point or two on this female harassment crisis that we're experiencing right now. My general point is that I don't think that it works where you can just hand over by doctrine to any group, to any race, to any gender, implied power, that you can go out there and you compete and everything, and that other side is going to go along with it because we say they must. This is basically what it is. It's not sustainable. It will collapse, and there's 3/4 of the world waiting for that to happen. When there's a void in power, that void is going to be filled very quickly, And I think that we know what happens to a population of men who are conquered. I know 80% of us will probably be gone at least, and that 60% of women left will have to make a choice. That's basically what. And I think it was yesterday where you made a comment about how once civilization goes past the point of just surviving, that they're trying to elevate all parts of the civilization, and that's part of the whole feminist movement. I understand that, but I don't think that we've ever seen in history where the masses, the percentage of masses that we need that have the actual ability of common sense and critical thinking to make that work.
Let me think about that for a little bit. I mean, you're absolutely correct that the militant feminist movement literally sees a world without men, or maybe a world organized like beehives where 99.9% of the population are female and they only keep around enough males to keep the queen reproducing new bees. But
the Amazon society, right?
Yeah, well, the Amazon society. But the idea is nobody's handing these groups the power. They're trying to seize it through political and propaganda means. But again, with the population losing trust and confidence in the corporate media, I think these things are a lot less effective than they used to be. If you look at this huge push for Antifa and Black Lives Matter to try and kick up race riots in the country, it never really got any traction. So I think, you know, the militant feminist movement in the 90s burned itself out. They discredited themselves. Yes, they're being revived again, but I don't think they're going to do any better now than they did back then.
Right. Well, you know, it remains to be seen if the women in general go along with this, and you know, we don't know that. I hope not, but it's possible. But you know, I just know that I've never seen in history where societies have reached that point where they can actually elevate themselves to some kind of utopian standards. You know, to me, that's what it's more utopian. It goes against what I think human nature has shown us.
Well, the problem with the utopia is that it can only exist if everybody living in it is basically a saint, and that's not reality. Civilizations, when they're first starting up, their goal is to elevate themselves. Nations tend to go through this life cycle where there'll be a blooming start of a new nation, and they'll grow and they'll prosper. Then the population gets complacent. Then corruption starts to take on over. You get the bread and circuses phase, and then finally it all collapses from that corruption. It happened to Rome, and it's happening here as well. Anyway, listen, I'm going to let you go. We're coming up on a commercial break here.
Okay,
and bye-bye. I'm going to try and fit Mike in Brazil before the commercial. You said you had one more point to make. Mike in Brazil, are you there? Okay, apparently not. Let's turn to...
Can you hear me?
Is this Mike?
Yes, this is Mike from Brazil.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
You've got about a minute and a half to make the point you wanted to make.
Let me ask you a favor. Can you take me over the commercial?
Okay, but it's going to have to be really short because we've got three more callers, and I'm trying to fit them all in before Claire on the show. Okay.
I have 4 points. I have just 4 talking points. That's it. It's going to take 2 minutes, maybe.
You told the screener you had 1 point. Okay, so.
Oh yeah. I think I miscalculated.
Okay, well, Mike, call in on Monday. Call in on Monday, and we're gonna. Well, I can't even switch to Dustin because we're there at the break here. Remember what I said before about you're responsible for where a bullet goes when you fire it, applying it to this case of this illegal immigrant. Apparently, a New York man has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. He shot and killed a woman that he thought was a deer. Apparently was out there hunting, and he heard something in the bushes and thought it was a deer, and he pulled the trigger, which you never should do. You always check your targets. We're going to take a break for commercials. We're going to be back for some fast phone calls, followed by the lovely Lady Claire. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to try and fit some phone calls in here before the top of the hour. I don't think I can get them all. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, hello, Mike.
Hello.
I didn't know Dick Cheney moved to New York.
I don't know that he actually lives in New York, but he's definitely tangled up with that New York subsidiary of that company, the one that got that oil contract from Israel.
No, I meant because the guy who shot the woman thought she was a deer. Didn't Dick Cheney shoot somebody?
Yeah, you're right. Was out there shooting captive game and turned around and shot his lawyer, and then the lawyer was forced to apologize for inconveniencing him. That was absurd.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. You know, what's going on in San Francisco. I mean, California's gone. It's been gone for a long time. I know people call in from California, like Peter from Los Angeles and stuff. I don't know if he still lives there. I thought he was moving, but like, yeah, it's you know, Mike, they idolize illegal aliens and Wahhabist terrorists. Either CNN, they always come to bat for them, and it's been indoctrinated over there, you know, like in California especially, and New York, and, you know, and Oregon, and all these other states where it's like, it's crazy. I mean, the guy killed this woman. Like,
yes.
I mean, I don't understand.
Well, apparently the Department of Justice has just issued a new arrest warrant for him. So they may be getting ready to try him on federal charges.
But isn't he a threat to, like, national security? Like, there has to be some kind of statute. I mean, they can rendition people, grab people off the streets and hold them indefinitely. Why is this guy still walking around? And if you look at the mayor and the governor, they all got, like Tucker Carlson said, they all have blood on their hands. They are responsible. The whole movement is responsible for this death.
Well, they're all tangled up with the New World Order, the global government here. Anyway, listen, Dustin, I'm sorry. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to try and fit in one more phone call before the top of the hour. Kathleen in Paris, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha.
Aloha.
Michael.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my call. I didn't know if you're going to... Do you sometimes take calls when... Claire is there? Oh, no.
Yes, we do, but I like to give Claire a block of time to get her talking points going.
Yeah. Well, I was going to talk about how this last election cycle has been something like a brain transplant for me, because I've always been a Democrat. And I kept, you know, finding that I was listening, oh my God, I'm listening to Fox News. And I'm listening to people that I never would listen to before. And they were making sense. And
Kathleen, I hate to cut you off. We got to do our station break, and then we'll be back with Lady Claire after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And but hold off the calls for a little bit, because obviously we'd like Claire to have her chance to get her talking points out there. So take it away, gorgeous Lady Claire.
Thank you, Michael.
Oh, wait a minute. I got to turn up your mic. Would probably help if I turned up your volume.
Yes, that would probably help.
Okay.
I don't think I have ever in my life been so thoroughly disgusted with the American political landscape. What I'm looking at, Michael, are people who are not there to govern in an intelligent way that gives the average working stiff, and hey, I'm one of them, an opportunity to do better.
No,
it's blood sport for money.
Yeah.
And nothing makes this more obvious than the way in which Flynn has been badgered and flipped. And it's just really, really disgusting to me to see this going on. And apparently, Flynn has amassed more than $1 million in legal fees.
Yes,
which is
he's bankrupt.
Yeah,
he's not bankrupt. That's why he had to make a deal.
Everything.
He's lost everything.
And that was what Mueller was expecting to have happen.
Breitbart just came on. Well, it's lawfare, the term. Just grind people down until they run out of money, and then they're stuck.
Yep.
Breitbart just came out with a story that apparently it was Jared Kushner who told Michael Flynn to make a contact with the Russians. And the actual discussion that took place was simply Trump sending a message, don't escalate the situation because of all the U.S. sanctions, because we want to tone things down. And that seems like a very reasonable thing to want to do, unless you're a war hawk and a war profiteer.
Yeah, and also find ways to work together to defeat ISIS.
Yes.
That's another one of the things they were trying to do. And for this, it appears that Flynn is getting absolutely crucified.
Well, Flynn is not the target.
I know.
You know, what Mueller is trying to do as part of the plea deal is to get Flynn to say something that can be used to go after Donald Trump, even though Trump is not implicated in any of the things they've found now.
No.
But Flynn, the real issue for Flynn is some work he did for the Turkish government before he even joined the Trump campaign or administration.
Okay.
But Mueller is just going to put the screws to him any way he can to try and extract a confession or an accusation that they can use to go after Donald Trump.
And it doesn't look to me like President Trump has got his A-game together at all on this.
No, he doesn't. I was saying earlier in the show, he better get those brass knuckles out.
Yeah.
Those presidential brass knuckles. Remember when Bill Clinton had the presidential knee pads? Well, now we've got presidential brass knuckles we need to get out there.
But if there is a successful impeachment, and I'm hoping it does not come to this, then the narcocracy has won.
They have one.
Yeah.
Mike Pence will definitely not have the desire or interest to stand up to the entrenched system.
No.
And it is rather alarming by whatever means they were able to do so.
Yeah.
Trump has been co-opted and compromised and brought in line with the ongoing permanent U.S. policy of more war, more war, more war economy, more plundering of the people, more loss of our civil liberties, more surveillance. And it is alarming. And I'm not surprised I'm getting these phone calls like we did earlier today where people are saying it's time for a revolution. And I don't agree with that.
No, I do not either.
But I acknowledge that one may be coming. And in the event of war, you know, I'm a hostage.
Okay.
So.
But you can see the absolute dismemberment, if you will, of the American political process, partisanship just for partisanship, not to really hold an ideal, and that's pretty scary. And
well, it's all about fighting for that control. And right now, the issue is that the Democrats, by hook or by crook, mostly by crook, are trying to win both houses of Congress next year. At which point they will impeach Donald Trump,
and they'll have the votes for it.
And they'll have the votes to do it. And it won't matter whether they really have a case or not. They'll impeach him because his shirt doesn't match his tie or some such nonsense as that.
Yeah. It has been rather disappointing to see the level of dialogue, if one can call it that, in D.C. these days, because it's pretty darned awful.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, I'd kind of like to move forward from this, and I know we'll have more to say about it a little bit later. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about is that apparently a think tank in Israel finally admitted that Israel and ISIS are allies in confronting Iran in Syria. And it's a new Meir Amit Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center report that says that ISIS and Israel are temporary allies against Iran.
Just like they were temporary allies against Syria.
Yeah, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We see it here working out yet another time. A new report suggests that in the area of countering Iran's presence in Syria, ISIS and Israel's interests may converge, which in a way makes them allies. Oh, I think we have a shout-out.
Yeah, we have a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network.
And despite suggesting no formal alliance between ISIS and Israel, an IDF-affiliated think tank made this report and indicated that they are the new allies against Iran.
Well, see, here's what's really going on. We know that ISIS was a made-up group to use as a proxy against Syria. We know the U.S. government has been arming and supplying them. At the same time, they're telling us ISIS are these horrible villains we must be afraid of. And so what this report is attempting to do is to sort of say, yeah, we're actually working together, but only temporarily, and they're still the bad guys.
Yeah. You know, I think that thinking Americans have already discarded that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And in terms of tactics, the report says ISIS will likely change its combat patterns and revert to guerrilla tactics and terrorism following the end of the campaign against it in Iraq, and may carry out hit-and-run attacks against Iranian vehicles moving along the land corridor. Iranian vehicles may get perceived as attractive targets for ISIS in its new incarnation.
Well, why would Iranian vehicles be attractive targets as opposed to Iraqi vehicles, or over in Syria, Syrian vehicles? And it's very clear at this point that ISIS is being directed in who they're going to attack.
Yeah.
Just like in Syria, they were being directed to go after Assad and his forces.
Yes. And this leads to another article that I think is very important, and it comes from antiwar.com. Again, if you have not had a chance to look at the website, I suggest you punch it up. There is a lot of good information out there. And this article talks about misusing intelligence to sell conflict with Iran, which is, yes.
They've misused the intelligence to sell every single war we've ever been in.
Yeah, yeah. And although no one knows exactly where Donald Trump intends to go with his campaign of seeking confrontation with Iran,
I'll bet it's Tehran.
Yeah, his administration already has provided disconcerting parallels with the techniques an earlier U.S. administration used in selling its launching of a war against Iraq. Among these techniques is the cherry-picking of intelligence not to inform policymaking or enlighten the public, but instead to inculcate false perceptions among the public and thereby to muster a support for a policy that's already been chosen.
Remember the Downing Street memo that came on out?
Exactly.
And they admitted the decision to invade Iraq had already been made, and they had to fix the propaganda around that agenda.
Yeah, they had to fix the narrative around what they were going to do.
In other words, lying us into a war.
Yeah, and I would like to hope, but I'm not real confident right at the moment, that President Trump understands that all the Israeli firsters around him and all the people in Saudi Arabia cheerleading for regime change in Tehran, he's got to understand, Michael, they want this to happen only at the cost of American blood and American money, and they don't give a darn about what the costs will such a war entail.
Well, it's a wonderful way to have a war. Somebody else pays for it, some other people's children die in it, and you get to reap the victory. Such a deal.
Not for the American kids who'll be deployed. And I also hope that President Trump realizes that should the U.S. and or Saudi Arabia and or Israel attack Iran, Russia will most probably jump into the fray on Iran's side because their military and political leadership have long vowed that should Iran be attacked, Russia will come to its aid militarily.
Well, there's another reason why Russia's probably going to do that, and that is because if you look at the pattern of U.S. military activity, Europe, Central Asia, it's an attempt to literally wall Russia and China off from the rest of the world.
Right.
And Iran coming under U.S. control and becoming part of that fortress, that part of that prison, would definitely be a major threat to Russia. So they're not going to let that happen. They'll come into Iran the same way they came into Syria. And as we've already seen in Syria, the Russian weapons are working.
Yes.
And the U.S. weapons pretty much don't.
Yeah, I do think that we are going to have to generate a whole new culture when it comes to weapons manufacturers, and that weapons that don't work, that are obsolete when they're field tested, that can't be allowed to happen to our men and women in uniform anymore.
It shouldn't happen. There should be oversight by the government. But again, as Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex, and even then it was already a problem. Harry Truman, before he became vice president and then president, he made his reputation by taking on defense contractors and saying, these people are being paid huge amounts of taxpayer money. They're not doing anything. The factories aren't being built, the jobs aren't being created, the weapons aren't being delivered. Why are we still sending them money? And it was a scam back then, and it's a scam now. And as I said earlier in the show, if the defense of the United States is the real objective, we have our nuclear deterrent.
Theoretically.
Theoretically, the largest nuclear arsenal on planet Earth, owned by the only country to ever actually use nuclear weapons on the civilians of another country. And if anybody attacks us, it's going to be national suicide. We'll melt their country down into this giant glowing puddle of green glass and send the Marines in to paint the parking stripes. Okay? So if defense is all we need, we don't need an army. We don't need an air force. We don't need a navy. We don't need 800 bases around the world if defense is what we're all about.
Yeah.
But what this government is really all about is going into other countries and basically twisting them around to serve the U.S. economic interests. The United States has become almost a bad parasite nation, as Israel. It's now dependent on this constant flow of wealth coming from all these other conquered and regime-changed countries.
Yeah, and the pattern is not going to stop unless the United States itself winds up getting stopped somehow.
Well, again, my concern is, given the long years of war, 16 years now, our existing weapons are worn out, our stockpiles are drawn down. The new weapons coming out of the military contractors are very expensive, very hard to maintain. They're not very effective. It's not a cost-effective way to run a war. I don't think the United States can win a war against a military peer, which may explain why the United States only picks on countries that are weak and helpless and can't fight back.
Right.
And then thumps their chest and says, look how butch we are.
Yeah, I hear you. I'd like to take a little leap over to some known and some hidden history about Hillary Clinton.
Oh, good.
And how she completely destroyed Honduran democracy. Her legacy at the State Department lives on, and it is not pretty. You have to look at the spectacle of slave auctions now in Libya, a nation liberated by NATO at Hillary's instigation. Remember, we came, we saw, he died. Behold the blood-soaked ruins of Syria, where her regime change plans caused the U.S. to fund the very jihadists we're supposed to be fighting. Talk about ironic. Add this to the not-so-bright idea of Washington jumping on board the abortive Arab Spring bandwagon, and it all adds up to the worst record of any Secretary of State in modern history.
Well, that depends on your point of view.
Yes.
From the point of view of the private central bankers, Libya was a success.
Yes.
We got rid of that state bank and reimposed a private central bank on them.
Right.
Somebody got all that gold for the gold dinar.
Yeah.
And again, Libya's oil back on the world market only for the U.S. dollar. So from certain points of view, Hillary did a really good job, and she's being rewarded for it.
Yes, but less well-known than the above disasters is the key role she played in turning Honduras over to a murderous dictator who is now provoking yet another crisis in that long-suffering country and sending thousands of refugees, including many unaccompanied minors, into Mexico and pouring over our southern border. And I really have to think that she was probably the worst Secretary of State in 20th century, 21st century history, and that's a lot of years. From our point of view,
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
From the point of view of George Soros, no, this is part of that New World Order agenda, open borders.
Yeah. There is a gentleman by the name of Michael Savage, and he and I sometimes agree, we sometimes agree to disagree. But when he talks about that trinity of language, culture, and borders, I think the guy's got it right. I really do. And I think in his immigration policy, I think Trump has really thought it through when he says that he wants the best of the best of the best. People who can work, people who can contribute, people who will want to become acclimatized and embrace the American way of life.
Well, that's been a reasonable policy all along. I mean, that was certainly the one that Teddy Roosevelt espoused. It's only the George Soros-backed New World Order globalists who think borders should be open and people should be free to go wherever they want. And, I mean, if you look at what's happened at Sweden, where joggers need armed escort,
that's so sad.
It is.
Yeah.
And, again, I don't think we need a wall down there on our southern border. I still think crocodiles in the Rio Grande would be cheaper. But all we need to do is start enforcing the immigration laws already on the books. Title 8. All of these mayors and governors who are saying sanctuary city and they're refusing to cooperate with immigration authorities, they should be thrown in jail. Anybody who is giving transportation or shelter or job to an undocumented immigrant, they're in violation of Title VIII. Throw them in jail.
Yeah.
You cut off that financial incentive to come to the United States of America illegally, they'll stop coming to the United States of America illegally. It is that simple.
I think so.
The problem is, you know, our politicians have gotten to a point now where nobody bothers enforcing the existing laws. They campaign on passing new laws and say problem solved.
Mm-hmm.
But it won't be solved because they won't be enforcing the new laws any better than they enforce the old ones.
Yeah. And what do you think this verdict yesterday on the murder of this young woman is going to have on the future of sanctuary cities in this country?
Well, I think that may be the reason why, the only explanation for this guy to have skated on the 2 murder charges and a manslaughter charge is there had to be political interference in order to not have this become an issue for the sanctuary cities and for people who are opposed to wide-open, limitless immigration. And apparently, though, the Department of Justice has issued a new arrest warrant for this man, so he may be tried on federal charges. But, I mean, he shot this girl on the pier in San Francisco from 78 feet away. His defense was he wasn't aiming at her, but the bullet ricocheted and hit her. Now, anybody who understands guns and gun law, when you pull that trigger, you are responsible for where that bullet goes and the damage it causes. And we had another story today where this guy in New York has been convicted on manslaughter because he was out hunting. He heard a noise in the bush, thought it was a deer, and shot this woman. And yes, throw the book at him. That was a stupid thing to do. And here we have this gentleman up in San Francisco. He's been deported multiple times. He sneaks back in. He's a convicted felon, and he's got an illegal gun, and he's just using it in a reckless manner on this Pier 14, firing the gun and hitting this woman from 78 feet away. He, at the very least, it should have been manslaughter for the same reason that our hunter who mistook the woman for a deer is. But I do think that there was a political pressure to make this case go away so it wouldn't be fodder for people who are opposed to this open border policy.
I wonder if the San Francisco authorities are going to let him go early so that the feds do not have a chance to arrest him.
Well, he was convicted on that illegal firearms charge, so I don't think they could just put him back out on the street. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Mike and Lady Claire. I hope you're doing well.
Yes, we are. What's on your mind?
Well, I've been listening to the show, and your show is based upon the United States and their habit of destruction, where their economic model is based upon destruction. We're going to go out, we're going to destroy this, and then it's going to be rebuilt, and, you know, somehow that's how we recycle the money supply, except that, of course, it's always expanding. Are you familiar with Jacques Fresco, I believe his name is?
Yeah, but to take one step backward here, you're absolutely right. Part of the way the United States profits off of wars is they'll go in and they'll smash up a country, and then they'll offer to come on in and rebuild it. But, of course, the money for the rebuilding comes from that country in the form of loans from various bankers. So it plunges that country into debt for decades to come while enriching American companies that are over there doing the rebuilding. Remember, they were doing that in Iraq once that war was over, and what was being built turned out to be junk. They built a police station. It cost a huge amount of money, in theory, and before it was even finished, it was starting to rot apart. And so that's another way that they profit off the war. Now, the other situation here is that because the United States got very arrogant and lazy following Bretton Woods, we've allowed our manufacturing to decline in quantity and quality, and now nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And so right now, war and conquest to keep the economy going is the only option left in the eyes of the U.S. government.
It seems that way because, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. Maybe I'm stupid. But when you bought something, I mean, it was supposed to be built to last. I mean, had a, you know, some kind of reasonable exchange, you know. And now it's everything is just junk. And Mike, it's everything. It's everything.
Yeah,
I mean, there are some names out there that are good.
Mm-hmm. We see it in the value engineering in almost every product that you pick up, unless you can afford mil-spec, and then those are terribly expensive, but otherwise...
Well, even they're junk these days. Look at the F-35.
Oh.
No, it's planned obsolescence. The corporate model is not to sell you a product that's going to last a very long time, but to keep selling you the same product over and over and over again. That's what made the Gillette razor company so wealthy. Prior to that, people had been using straight razors. You bought a straight razor, and if you took care of it, it was going to last you for a lot of years. But with the Gillette system, they made those disposable razor blades out of a very soft steel. That's why they were so easy to bend. And so you'd shave, and you'd go through a blade every week or so, and the money just kept pouring on in to the Gillette company. The same thing with our current medical practice. Nobody's looking for cures for a disease. Cures are a bad business model. If somebody comes into my office and they've got an illness and I cure them, they'll pay me once, and then they go away and I never see them again. But if somebody comes into my office with an illness and I treat the symptoms, then they come back the next month for more treatment of the symptoms and more treatment of the symptoms, and the money keeps rolling on in. And this idea of continuous forcing people to buy the same product over and over again has really contaminated our entire society and our entire economy. Look at computers. The way it's set on up, the way Microsoft forces us to get a whole new operating system every 5 years or so. And the current computers are built to last just about 5 years. And you go talk to somebody in the computer store and you say, why can't you build them to last? And they'll say, oh, there's no way to build them to last all that long. And I'll say, no, that's ridiculous. I got a Commodore VIC-20 here from the 1980s, and it still works perfectly. So, yeah.
They capacitors in it or something.
Say again?
I said, like, with Nichicon capacitors in it or something.
Yeah.
You know, like with good old-fashioned quality stuff.
Yeah.
Well, however they do it, it's called value engineering, and they literally design these things to simply fail after a certain time. Apple got into a lot of trouble when they came out with the first iPods because you couldn't replace the battery, and that battery was the first thing that would fail. And the attitude was, just buy a new iPod. They're not that expensive.
Or how about an iPad without a USB port?
Yeah,
right?
that one...
You have to use wireless or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll be very honest. I mean...
Very quickly, though, because
go ahead.
I want to hear more of Lady Claire. And then, you know, like, I'm going to go. The idea is that we're at a precipice right now. We are, because we're talking about oil depletion and everything else. But we're at a precipice. We can either go ahead into the future and change, or we can stay where we are and actually go back, and now we're going to end up in that junk pile that we're leaving behind.
Well, I think we may be heading into a new dark ages with the collapse of the American empire. Anyway, we got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Time to grab your pencil and paper. And for those of you who want to support Republic Broadcasting, and we need your support, I'm not going to lie to you about that one, the address where you can mail a check, money order, gift certificate, box tops, whatever, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number, if you want to call on in with a debit or credit card donation, is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And, of course, donations to whatreallyhappened.com are needed and gratefully accepted, and you can find that information on the website at whatreallyhappened.com. Before I turn this back over to Claire, we were watching the news during the commercial break, and they're really pushing this idea about how North Korea is a threat. North Korea is a threat. We must do something. North Korea is not a threat. North Korea has made it very clear they're developing their missiles and nuclear weapons as a deterrent to convince other aggressive nations to mind their own business. And North Korea is not going to just haul off and attack the United States of America, because the United States response would be to nuke all of North Korea and turn it into a radioactive wasteland. And North Korea knows this. And after all the money that they have spent developing this deterrent system, they're not going to throw it away on a whim. Nuclear-armed missiles are a weapon of absolute last resort in an already ongoing conflict.
And we're not there yet.
We're not there.
Yeah.
North Korea is not a threat to the United States of America. None of these countries have been a threat to the United States of America, other than the threat to private central banking and our economy.
Absolutely.
The United States is the only country that's ever actually used a nuclear weapon of mass destruction against the civilians of another country. We need to keep that in mind.
Yeah,
if we want to say use of nuclear weapons is bad and these nations should be disarmed, let's start with the nation that's actually done it.
Amen. Amen. I'd like to take a little trip over to the Middle East, to Syria. And there was an article that kind of left me scratching my head this morning as I read it in antiwar.com. And according to the U.S.-led coalition fighting ISIS, some 400 U.S. Marines and their accompanying artillery have been ordered back to the United States with their involvement of the capture of the Syrian city of Raqqa over. And Coalition Director Brigadier General Jonathan Braga says that the remaining forces will continue to stay in Syria to fight against ISIS or the emergence of future ISIS groups and to assist international governments and NGOs. Wrong. Mike, where do you think these 400 are most likely to be deployed to?
Well, I would like to see them come home and be mustered out, but we already know there's a manpower shortage across the entire military. So my guess is they're being brought home for arrest in anticipation of maybe being deployed elsewhere, such as North Korea.
Okay. And, it doesn't make sense to me. If the U.S. is not able to regime change Damascus, one of the oldest continuing populated cities in the world, by the way, then why is even one service person left in Syria?
Well, because the U.S. Doesn't want to admit they lost in Syria. Mm-hmm. And as long as they have forces in Syria, they may never win that, but they don't have to admit they lost it.
Yeah,
because
right.
if they lost Syria, or if they lose Afghanistan, the momentum for continuing this war agenda will collapse.
Yes, I see your point. Another little note from the Middle East, which comes from Press TV, and if you've never read it, it's an Iranian outlet in English, and I like to read it because I want to know what these people are saying and thinking. And if you've ever lived in Los Angeles, which Mike and I have, the Iranian business people I met came here for the same reasons our ancestors came here. They wanted a good education for their kid. They wanted to practice their faith without any prejudice or things going on there. And they saw that there were opportunities if one was willing to work hard.
And they're nice people.
Yeah.
They're very nice people.
Yeah.
I've worked with many Muslim people. They're all very pleasant. Mm-hmm. They're not trying to force their ways on anybody.
Yeah.
And,
But this was a very interesting thing that this gentleman did. The Quds commander in Iran declined a letter sent to him from CIA director. And the commander of the Quds Force, Qasem Soleimani, declined to receive and read a letter that was sent by CIA Director Mike Pompeo when he was in Baalbek Kamal, a border area between Syria and Iraq, which was liberated by the Syrian regime this month. And Mohammadi Gulpayagani said that the American official sent the letter to Soleimani from Iran's Revolutionary Guards through an intermediary. He didn't mention the time of the alleged incident, but it happened recently, Far News Agency reported. And what this General Soleimani said, I will not accept your letter, nor will I read it. I have nothing to do with these people. Gul Pagani, quoted from the Iranian commander as saying, now, Mike, I would imagine that this letter from Pompeo was an informal cease and desist order with regard to Iranian assistance to the Syrian government against the jihadis. Would you not concur that probably that was it?
That's probably a very good possibility of what's going on there.
Yeah. What's
really interesting, of course, is they're trying to build up this idea of Iran being in Syria, being a threat to Israel, but interestingly enough, Netanyahu's own people came out the other day and said there really isn't an Iranian military presence in Syria per se. There are some advisors and trainers there, but Iran doesn't have tanks or heavy artillery or anything like that. If you look at a map, you would see how difficult it would be for Iran to send that kind of hardware into Syria.
Yeah.
But again, right now, the goal is to get war with Iran going, because that's what Israel wants. That's what the private central bankers want. It's what the oil industry wants. And they're in a rush to get these wars going because if the economy collapses here in the United States and they do not have a war to blame it all on, we, the American people, are going to point the finger of blame at Washington, D.C. and Wall Street, where it honestly deserves to be.
Absolutely.
And it's not the first time that the U.S. government has used a world war to distract the public from how badly they messed up the economy. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008. We've now had 16 years of war.
Yeah, a 16-year-old kid living in this country has never not known what it was like to live in America during peacetime.
Well, that's actually true for a lot of people of all generations, because if you look back at the history of the United States, trying to find years when we weren't at war with somebody someplace, there's really very few.
Yeah.
I mean, since the end of World War II, the U.S. government has attempted regime change in over 50 countries, some of whom are supposed to be our friends.
Yeah.
And they succeed about half the time. And, of course, when they fail, there are repercussions. There was actually an effort to regime change the government of France, and that failed. And shortly thereafter is when France came on back and said, we're going to trade in all of our Federal Reserve notes for gold at the agreed-on price of $34 an ounce.
Whoa.
Which is what forced Nixon to end gold convertibility.
Yeah.
So, these things always have consequences. But too many people in government and the military, they're thinking about an immediate objective, and they're not really analyzing what could happen long-term.
Yeah.
Because their attitude is, well, another few years I'm going to retire, or I'm going to be out of office in private life, and this will be somebody else's mess to deal with.
Right, right. Speaking of a mess,
yes.
The Saudis intercepted another ballistic missile fired from Yemen yesterday. Yes. And in the immortal words of Casey Stengel, it's déjà vu all over again.
Now, Saudi Arabia is claiming to have shot this down, knowing that bin Salman wants to somehow get justification to go into Iran.
Right.
We don't know if there really was a missile, but it will be obvious. They'll try and say it was an Iranian missile, Iran provided it, it's Iran's fault. Forgetting, of course, that Saudi Arabia has attacked Yemen. There is a state of war between them, and Yemen has every right to fight back and defend their country with whatever means are available and necessary.
And this is what I find so deliciously ironic in the Saudi royal and military mindset, that the rebels aren't supposed to be able to hit back in this ongoing 3-year genocide against the people of Yemen, courtesy of its butcher, Prince Salman.
Well, that's been the U.S. policy.
Yeah.
They only go after countries that can't fight back. Almost reminds me of that Eddie Izzard comedy special.
Yeah.
You know, oh my goodness, they're shooting back. Are they allowed to do that?
Right, right.
Okay.
I think that was called Dressed to Kill. It was a very funny piece for HBO. Getting back to...
They brought a flag.
Yes.
Oh, we're in trouble now.
Yes. Apparently, top U.S. and Chinese generals are talking to each other after the missile test. The meetings were held on Wednesday and Thursday, just hours after Pyongyang's intercontinental ballistic missile test early Wednesday morning. And it was People's Liberation Army Major General Xiao Yuanming and the U.S. Defense Department's Lieutenant General Richard Clark. And they were talking about ways to improve channels of communication regarding the situation. And I call that at least hopeful. Where there's dialogue, there's probably a little bit less of a chance of something going south. And I commend both the Chinese and U.S. government for at least developing a little bit of dialogue. I see that look on your face.
Yeah, because what may be going on is they're going to solidify the communication so that when the U.S. goes into North Korea, they will call up China and say, stand down. You don't want to mess with us. Because, again, looking at this propaganda that we were getting on the TV a little while ago, it looks like the North Korea attack is on again. And they're probably looking at a decapitation strike, and it's going to be very dangerous because I'm sure that by now North Korea has dispersed their available missiles and nuclear warheads, and it's impossible to guarantee that the U.S. is going to get them all in an attack unless they simply nuke the entire country and melt it down.
And how, Mike, how do they prevent blowback against South Korea? Because the numbers I've looked at are just grim beyond belief in terms of South Korean mortality from this.
Well, it would be. I mean, now Kim Jong-un is saying that he's not interested in attacking South Korea or Japan or any of those other countries, that his entire concern is with a U.S. attack. But once the bullets and bombs start flying, who knows what's going to happen? If Kim Jong-un himself is killed, we don't know who's going to take over the government. They may have a completely different idea. And while North Korea only has a few nuclear warheads, we're assuming, and limited numbers of missiles, they are wealthy in conventional tube artillery, and they have just dug those mountains full of tunnels north of the DMZ, and they have the artillery in there where it can't be bombed from above, and all of it can reach Seoul, South Korea.
Wow, which is a very densely populated city.
Yes.
Very densely. I would like to go over to the city of Baltimore, which is not doing too well these days.
No, it is not.
Apparently, Baltimore police are now blocking the FBI from investigating the murder of a cop set to testify against fellow cops.
This is a big sting.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
apparently involves a massive corruption within the police. And this police officer was, if I recall correctly, because I got the story lower down here, was shot with his own revolver.
Ouch. And
now the FBI is trying to come on in, and Baltimore police are saying, no, we'll take care of it.
And
shot with his own gun. The day before he was set to testify against corrupt cops within his own department.
And unlike...
Shades of Serpico.
Oh, yeah. Unlike most other shootings where police are the victims, no one has been arrested, and there is no suspect to speak of. In fact, this is the only time in the history of Baltimore that a suspect in the shooting of a police officer has gone this long uncaptured. And apparently, with every day that passes, more suspicious details are uncovered which cast doubt on the official narrative that has been given by the police department since the shooting brings suspicion on the department itself. And it sort of looks at looking at this, Mike, like the Boston PD has elevated Baltimore, thank you, has elevated police corruption to an art form.
Not that Boston's much better.
Sorry about that.
TV and movies sell us this idea that the police are all great people. We know that's not true. Some are good. We've got a neighbor who's HPD.
And she's wonderful.
And
good gal,
we're very
good
friends on that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I remember when I was in Los Angeles during the Rampart scandal, I remember something that happened that didn't make the national media, and it should have. They literally arrested the entire Hollywood division
of the
LAPD because they'd been running a two-order burglary operation where people would come on in and say, I want this TV, and they'd plunk down some bucks, and the police would literally go on out, break into somebody's home, and steal the TV. And they literally, the entire Hollywood division got arrested on that one.
Here's another article that I think is very important. The BRICS countries are planning their very own trading system. And as the U.S. and its EU partners continue to levy punitive sanctions on Russia, the BRICS are responding with new financial initiatives to help their members break out of the U.S. and European trading monopoly. Now, currently, both China and Russia are surging ahead as the world's top central bank buyers of gold, further consolidating their position to be able to weather a global dollar crisis, which many experts believe is inevitable. When that happens is anyone's guess.
Well, that may be the reason why Russia came out the other day with this very odd comment that any U.S. seizures of Russian gold would be considered an act of financial war.
Right.
Because with the new round of sanctions that are coming on down, it could lead to the United States seizing Russian assets that are outside Russia's border. And like many other countries that are settling accounts with gold, some of Russia's gold is outside Russia in these various gold depositories and large central banks. And I'm sure Russia would like to get it back. But again, look how much trouble Germany had trying to get their gold back.
Right.
So this is why we keep saying economic wars have a bad habit of turning into real wars.
Yeah.
We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. And Claire, take it away.
Well, going back to the BRICS becoming gold traders and establishing their own markets, this is why we are seeing such demonization of China and Russia in the American press. To prevent a loss of dollar hegemony, the U.S. government's willing to go to war to prevent this if they deem it necessary.
Well, they've obviously deemed it necessary because the U.S. dollar's hegemonic domination of the planet is definitely slipping.
Yeah.
Bit by bit, they're losing their grip, and that's why they're in a panic.
And it's unfortunate for President Trump and this country that all of Trump's president whisperers are, if you will, war-centric, as though this was the only way to resolve the U.S. government's geopolitical conflicts, rather than good faith, moral, hard-won negotiations, which...
From their point of view, that is the only solution.
Yeah.
We're not able to manufacture products that anybody wants to buy at a reasonable price. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture.
Please,
War
no.
is all they got left.
Yeah, yeah. It's unfortunate, especially when we've seen this coming for so long.
Yes, it is very frustrating to have seen it coming for the decades that we've been involved in doing this.
Yeah.
But wasn't it von Clausewitz who said war is an extension of politics by other means?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're there.
Yeah, absolutely. This was something that I thought our readers and listeners needed to know about.
We actually did talk about this one.
Oh, you did?
The suicide detection.
Yeah.
System. Yeah.
Yeah, that...
If Facebook thinks you're suicidally depressed, the police will come get you.
Yeah.
Take away your guns.
Right. There has been a development in Evergreen State's student newspaper, includes a no whites allowed opinion section. And it has a section in its opinion pages described as for people of color by people of color. And the way that they are describing this is, this should be a place where we can be us without it being overshadowed by the dark cloud that is living under white supremacy and having to see things from a white perspective. This is why when we do cover these issues, it will be in the context and from the perspective of, POC and POC only, according to the section's editors, as they reintroduced it in September.
Racism is back.
You know.
This is going to upset all the albinos, because those are the only white people I know. I'm color. I've got color. You've got color.
Yes.
You've got good color.
Mike's golden.
Yes.
I really have to fear for these kids if when they graduate, they're not seeing themselves through the lenses of self-empowerment and competency rather than a decided exclusion. The whole issue of seeing microaggressions in everything people around them are doing isn't going to go very far to get them a job interview. And that is just the cold, hard reality of this world. Perpetual victimhood is not something employers look for and will shove it like the plague with these job candidates when they graduate.
Yeah, these colleges are costing a huge amount of money. The cost of college has soared way out of sync with the rate of inflation.
Yeah.
These kids have taken on these huge student loans, and they're not prepared to find a high-paying job, even if there was a high-paying job out there.
Yeah.
And
they're getting played, and I hate to see that.
Like everything else in this country, higher education's been turned into just another racket.
Yeah.
You know, Smedley Butler said war is a racket.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can expand that to say the United States is a racket.
And I remember my college experience back in California. I graduated from Cal State Dominguez Hills before it became Cal State University Dominguez Hills. And it was a rainbow community. We had kids there who looked like me, all kinds of kids, and they got together and they worked.
All right, well, there's the music, so it's time for our show to end, and have a really good weekend, a safe weekend. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He's got a lot of wonderful things to share with you, and we'll be back.